Think you've enough superhero shows already? You're wrong. We've just finished Invincible, Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Wandavision all in the last few months. We've got The Boys to look forward to this year as well, but in between, it's a brand new show from Netflix and legendary comic creator Mark Millar. It's Jupiter's Legacy. My name's Al, this is the Geek in Review, so let's get to it. Now, this comic book is still being published at the moment. Coming out in 2013, this comic is still being made at the moment. Mark Millar did reveal in an interview with Grace Randolph this week that there's an edition coming on later on this year, but it did initially start in 2013, and I have been reading the comic book this week again, and I have to say I'm absolutely loving it, so I've been looking forward to the series as well. And because Mark Millar's a bit of a local boy for me and Scottish, I do feel a little bit proud whenever I see some of his work on screen, and he's done some absolutely huge things, or he's been involved in some huge things, or at the very least someone in Hollywood has stole his ideas to give him a bit of money but to make themselves more money, because that's just how Hollywood works. Films like Wanted, Kick-Ass, Kingsman and the Secret Service. We've had adaptations of his great storylines, or at least very loose ones, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well, most notably with Civil War. Now, this is Millar's first production since he signed the deal with Netflix, so it's something that he's got direct creative control over. So I was very interested to see what was going to come off the page and how it was going to appear on the screen. And I have to say, I'm not disappointed. Now, I'm not going to go into too many spoilers on this because, as I say, the comic book is still ongoing. And as with all comic book adaptations to screen, there may be slight changes, but given it's the same creator on both formats, it'll be very interesting to see how this show progresses. Also helmed by Stephen DeKnight, who's previously worked with Netflix on the Daredevil show, which is sadly cancelled because Marvel and Disney wanted more money. So that added a little bit more into this, because stylistically I love Daredevil. So what's this show about? Now, yes, it is another superhero show, but this one is firmly rooted more in the family arc. What this show explores is the power dynamic and the pressures within a family, especially if it's a family business. A great comparison that I've kind of been using is, imagine if a political family like the Kennedys or the Bushes were superheroes. Because what these families are doing is effectively, with their children, they're getting groomed into roles going in the future. And the pressures and stress that come along with that is something that I hope is going to get heavily explored in this season. Certainly in the first two episodes, especially the second one, it's very family orientated. There isn't a lot of the superhero stuff in the first episode. There's a little bit at the start with Brandon Sampson, who's Paragon. That's the Utopian, played by Josh Duhamel, who's the main character's son. He goes up against a bad guy and pretty much gets his ass handed to him. His dad, the Utopian, aka Sheldon Sampson, basically tells him that he's not ready for this and that the Utopian has to present certain ideals. Now, the Utopian is a character that's a sort of cross between Superman and Captain America. He seems to be the most superpowered individual in this world, certainly in the group or the team that he's a part of, which is called the Union. So just to set it up, in this world, superheroes and supervillains exist, and they have existed for many decades. The comic book does do a deep dive into how they get their powers, and the show is going to do the same, but I can't talk about it too much just now because it's not really referred to or mentioned in the first episode. This is more a set-up for the season. Where these characters are at the moment, we're also getting flashbacks to the 1920s of Sheldon and his brother Walter in the 1920s, just before the Wall Street crash. Now, this is very important because it tells us a few facts that these guys have been around for quite a while, but also, as well as that they weren't originally super powered, they were just normal men. The Utopian, as I said, is sort of a cross between Captain America and Superman, that he's the most powerful individual that we've seen or that we know of so far in this world. He's also got a very old school sensibility, which is a little bit more biblical and Old Testament, not in the harsh sense. He just wants everyone to live up to this ideal, and it is explained pretty clearly in the first two episodes why he's so righteous and insistent, but all the superheroes in this world seem to live by the code that he's come up with, which essentially is your powers are there to benefit others. You shouldn't be selfish with them, you shouldn't waste them. In the opening scenes, this gets set up with a flashback with his daughter when she uses her powers to sort of intimidate a few children. They have a great little setup about the great power comes great responsibility line, but basically he believes if you are superpowered, you've got a duty to try and help the world, but also using these powers, you shouldn't kill. Now, the morality of superpowers and power itself and having it is something that this show is going to go into as well. There's a great scene actually between Sheldon and his brother Walter, who's also a superhero called Brainwave. He's basically a sort of psychic. He can make you see things. He can actually pull your mind out of your body and trap you in what he calls a painting, which is just like a sort of dreamlike state where he controls the reality. What's interesting about this guy, Walter, is that he's got the powers of Professor X, but he's got a bit of the attitude and point of view of Magneto. There's a great scene in the episode where Sheldon and Walter are discussing what it is to be superheroes, what they've done in the world and what they could have done differently. And after a lifetime of serving, do they still want to keep doing the same thing? Walter mentions that he feels that he always regrets that they didn't intervene earlier in the Second World War to help prevent things like the death camps and the Holocaust, and of course all the soldiers who fought to liberate Europe from the Nazis. And that he thinks now that after over a century of doing this, maybe that the world should change how it works, and that not only should superheroes not have all the physical power, but also have all the political power as well. So they're making all the decisions, which pretty much lines up with Magneto, but this guy doesn't really have the fear of being persecuted the same way because he's already on top. Now, this is a great theme that Mark Millar's brought up before in Civil War, with the whole thing about the powers registration. Again, if you haven't read the comic, I'd highly recommend it. But what Sheldon comes back with is he basically says, where do we draw the line? If we can stop a war, surely then we can start one as well. And once we start that, that's a path that we cannot stop, because the more power that you give to a person, the more potentially corrupt they're going to be and abusive with it. And if you give that to a superpowered person, then there's not going to be anyone that's going to be able to oppose them. So how does this show compare to recent outings like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Invincible and The Boys? Well, it looks great on screen, as I said. The costumes are absolutely fantastic. They look pretty accurate to what they did in the comics, and the details are great. The makeup generally all over is pretty solid. The acting from Josh Duhamel and Ben Daniels, who plays Walter slash Brainwave, and Sheldon and the Utopian. I really like this, especially in the flashbacks. You see them coming to a head, and really the power exchange between these guys is going to be very interesting to see how that played out from the 1920s up until the present day. Leslie Bibb and all the other actors that are playing, that show up in the first episode, are pretty solid, but this is just a general introduction to this world. We learn that in the 1920s, the Samson family were basically sort of like the Rockefellers, but slightly lower down. They'd helped to build America, or build New York in the very least. And this starts this cycle that I think we're going to see repeating. So this is just the start of the wheel rolling down the hill, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they're going to do with this. I'm going to drop an episode review every day. I'm not going to get too spoilerific in it, but certainly keep an eye out. Now, as I said at the start, there isn't a lot of superheroing in this. There's a bit of a fight at the end, and there is actually a surprisingly huge superhero team up that you see in a large battle, which generally in these kind of shows you don't get straight away, so it was refreshing to see this, and you get to see a lot of people use powers that were quite familiar. During this battle, several of the younger superheroes die, and Black Star is basically pummeling the entire Union, which again is the Avengers or the Justice League of this world. Walter slash Brainwave manages to pull Dark Star out of his mind and gets him onto a sort of beach resort. While this is going on, the team are pummeling his physical body, but they're not having much luck. Black Star manages to overwhelm Brainwave and then gets on top of the Utopian and is just basically about to kill him when his son Brandon, aka Paragon, that's his superhero name, because this show, you not only have to remember the actors' names, you have to remember their main characters' names and their superhero names, so I'll probably get a few wrong. Let me know in the comments or on Twitter, don't worry about that. Basically, Paragon overpowers Black Star and punches his head clean off his shoulders, breaking his dad's one sacred rule, which is you do not kill. So this really sets up what's going to happen in episode 2. I have watched it, but I'm not going to talk about it yet. I'm going to post that up tomorrow, so again, make sure you don't miss that with a like and subscribe. I'm going to be doing a lot more with Star Wars, The Bad Batch, and a few Star Trek Picard theories as well, and Discovery. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, again, please leave a subscription to the channel, it would mean a lot. You can follow me on Twitter @TheGeeksReviews. I've been Al, you've been fantastic, have a good weekend.